Hey, Bio2 students, Mr. Yance. Hope everything's going well. Just want to go over a few notes here, and as I go through them, please fill out your note packet I gave you in class, or if you're virtual, fill out the one that's online. And we just want to kind of pick up with Roman numeral 3 here, ecosystems. We talked about, the different levels of organization in biology and how we start out with this huge biosphere. It's got every living environment out there. And then we start breaking it down until we get down to a species and organisms and things like that. So I kind of want to zero in on an ecosystem, which if you look back on notes, that's all the organisms, living and the non-living things that affect it. So, we're going to focus on this year talking about obviously living things and how they affect one another. But you got to throw the non-living world in there as well. So every organism interacts with their environment in a little different way, and each environment's got its own kind of characteristics. So both organisms and environments affect each other. And these can get really complex. Look at the ones I got on the screen here. You got everything from, a freshwater lake to a swamp to a bog to an ocean, coral reef, you name it. So you look at these different types of ecosystems that are out there, and there's just so much variety and so much differences among them. And what we had to do in biology is try to find some common thread that kind of links some stuff together. And I think probably the most important thing is there's two major things that no matter if I'm talking about an aquatic or a desert or a rainforest, I don't care how dynamic of an ecosystem you have to look at cycling of nutrients, which materials are acquired by plants and eventually return to the soil, obviously, and the flow of energy from sunlight to producers to consumers. So that's pretty much what dictates every ecosystem that's out there. And it doesn't really matter what one you're talking about. What does matter is some ecosystems are obviously better at these two things than others. A rainforest is awesome at doing these two things. A desert, not so much, right? So you kind of have to look at those different competing characteristics whenever you look at an ecosystem. So let's kind of look at energy conversion at first. So a little review back from your middle school days, Bio 1 days. Activities of life require work, and work depends on a source of energy. So you have to have an energy source that comes from somewhere. And I know ultimately all energy comes from the sun, but I'm not necessarily just talking about that. I'm talking about how is that energy passed from and through an ecosystem, from organism to organism, and how good is that exchange, as you see there in number 3, how good is that exchange between an organism and their environment? And basically it's all about energy transformation. We don't destroy energy, we don't create energy, it has to go somewhere. So in those transformations among organisms, you got to look at what happens to that energy. A lot of it is lost in the form of heat. So as energy flows through that ecosystem, usually entering as light, exiting as heat, what you got to look at is how are organisms adapted? How are they able? How good are they at that energy exchange in that ecosystem? All right. I'm going to bring up a slide here and you can see what I'm talking about. So ultimately, I'm going to skip that top video, but ultimately, energy comes in the form of sun. Producers, plants, and other photosynthetic organisms are going to convert it into some usable form, which we'll get to in a later chapter. And then eventually it's transformed into a chemical energy, ATP mainly, and then consumers, including animals, are going to transform that into something that's usable. You see, though, we lose a lot of it as heat. So, I always say this. I say this in my anatomy class a lot. This may sound like a funny statement, but, if we were go to a store and we were looking for an appliance, and that appliance happens to be a human, we wouldn't buy ourselves because we are terrible at efficiency, and a lot of animals are, especially the top carnivores on the food chain. So even though we may not be the best, the consumer end of things at transforming energy into usable forms, we do it just enough to keep us alive every single day. And let's face it, that's kind of the name of the game, right? Is being able to transfer that energy, transform it into something that's usable. So let's just jump right into the ultimate level of organization in a living thing. That's the cellular level. That is the lowest form of life. You can't get below that and still have a living thing. It's the lowest we can go. And we all know that cells have the ability to grow, repair, and do all the things, all those characteristics of life, right? So I just want to show you a quick little video. I apologize, it may echo a little bit, but let me show you this quick video real quick, okay? Maybe. See if I can blow it up a little bit. So if you just give me a second, we'll see if we can load this thing. It may or may not load. There we go. Makes you think.
I'm a medical illustrator, and I come from a slightly different point of view. I've been watching since I grew up the expressions of truth and beauty in the arts and truth and beauty in the sciences, and while these are both wonderful things in their own right, they both have very wonderful things going for them. Truth and beauty as ideals that can be looked at by the sciences and by the math are almost like the ideal conjoined twins that a scientist would want to date. These are expressions of truth as awful things, by meaning they are things you can worship. They are ideals that are powerful, they are irreducible, they are unique, they are useful, sometimes often a long time after the fact. And you can actually roll some of the pictures now, because I don't want to look at me on the screen. Truth and beauty are things that are often opaque to people who are not in the sciences. They are things that that describe beauty in a way that is often only accessible if you understand the language and the syntax of the person who studies the subject in which truth and beauty is expressed. If you look at the math E equals mc squared, if you look at the cosmological constant where there's an anthropic ideal where you see that life had to evolve from the numbers that describe the universe, these are things that are really difficult to understand. And what I've tried to do since I had my training as a medical illustrator, since I was taught animation by my father, who was a sculptor and my visual mentor, I wanted to figure out a way to help people understand truth and beauty in the biological sciences by using animation, by using pictures, by telling stories, so that the things that are not necessarily evident to people can be brought forth and can be taught and can be understood. And students today are often immersed in an environment where what they learn is subjects that have truth and beauty embedded in them, but the way they're taught is compartmentalized, and it's drawn down to the point where the truth and beauty are not always evident. It's almost like that old recipe for chicken soup, where you boil the chicken until the flavor is just gone. And we don't want to do that to our students. So we have an opportunity to really open up education. And I had a telephone call from Robert Liu at Harvard in the Molecular and Cellular Biology Department a couple of years ago. And he asked me if my team and I would be interested and willing to really change how medical and scientific education is done at Harvard. And so we embarked on a project that would explore the cell, that it would explore the truth and beauty inherent in molecular and cellular biology, so that students could understand a larger picture, that they could hang all of these facts on.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of show you a little bit of that video, just to kind of show you that I think sometimes we do kind of forget about the beauty that's in biology, and we think that the arts and sciences are two different things, and really they're blended together. And we teach, we show you pictures, and we draw, we do color diagrams, and I try to show YouTube videos, but it really doesn't do justice when you start to look into that level of organization. The cell is remarkable, and I know it's kind of, oh, here we go, talking about the cell again. It's not like we haven't had this in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade science, Bio 1. We get tired of hearing the cell in biology, but here's the deal. If we don't understand how the basic cell works and how it functions, we pretty much can't teach biology, because that's where it all starts. And it's at that cellular level. I don't care if we're talking about a plant, an animal, or whatever you want to talk about. It starts with this right here, and cell division and being able to reproduce more cells, and those cells doing their thing. So, it's pretty crazy when you look at it that way. And then where it really gets fascinating and interesting, which we're going to do a lot of stuff in this year, more so than you ever have before, is in the realm of genetics. And when that cell's DNA is, you need to understand how it works within the cell and how we make more blood, more skin, more muscle, and that type of thing. But when you start breaking it down into genes, and then you start talking about these genes being passed on from parent to offspring, that's where things get quite fascinating in the realm of biology. And just to give you a very simple illustration of that today, we had this girl come over, and we were taking some family pictures today for Christmas, and she walked in the door. My 3 dogs, I have Thor and Annie, which are brother and sister, and I have Sasha, which is the mom. And these 3 dogs mug her. She's a big dog person. She actually has 5 dogs, which is kind of crazy. And she was just fascinated when we started saying, oh, yeah, these are brother and sister. And they're full brother and sister. One looks like a golden retriever. The other one looks like a white, shaggy dog. And then you go, okay, these 2 are siblings. They're like, oh, no way. And then you say, okay, here's the mom. Here she's black with curly hair. And you're looking at her like, that's the mom? And that's genetics. It's fascinating when you start looking at, the different genes and not just, the variations of those genes and how we get all these crazy things, but then how we pass those on to our offspring and to future generations. And then you start talking about genetic diseases and things like that. It gets kind of crazy. And I love this picture up here. Just think about this. We all started as this blastocyst. We all started as 2 cells, which is kind of crazy. And then look at how fast we develop into an embryo and eventually a full human in that 9-month pregnancy. Then you talk about other animals that have a 3-month, 2-month gestation. Insane, how fast that happens. And we're going to talk in great detail about that coming up here. We're going to cover a lot of ground pretty quick here, but it is pretty amazing. So, and this is nothing new to any of you. Kind of have one too many clicks there. And the fact that every DNA is this big double helix. You guys were taught that in Bio 1, deoxyribonucleic acid. But we're going to start breaking it down. And I want you to understand the mechanisms that are involved in copying that DNA, not from just cell to cell, but from one generation to the next. What can go wrong with that? How we can use DNA in crime scenes. We'll talk about that. We'll do a fun lab called electrophoresis where we'll look at DNA. And this is just kind of like previews. This is like coming attractions at the movie theater. Trying to introduce you, not a complex chapter here at the beginning, but I think a chapter that hopefully will give you kind of an insight to what you're going to get into in a dual credit class or any biology 101 class you take in college. All right. So that's it for Notes for Day. So hopefully you're having a good day. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. See you. Bye.